What's up, everybody? Welcome into yet another edition of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein, and I am joined by a man who just dropped 47 points with no turnovers against the Atlanta Hawks, Nikola Jokic. Sorry, wrong partner. Ben McDonald, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I keep getting you confused with international phenoms.
I know. I'm getting replaced soon, ladies and gentlemen. He's deciding between Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic. He's trying to decide which itch he's gonna he's gonna scratch. Oh, taking your dad
Wow.
joke corner.
By all means, I can't be the only dad jokester around here. But before we actually get into the meat and potatoes and talk some NBA hoops, it seems like news always breaks on Wednesdays after we record because on New Year's
True.
Day, the NBA lost an icon in former Commissioner Emeritus David Stern. So Ben and I wanted to start the show by honoring David. And I mean, obviously we didn't know him, but just kind of talking about what he's done for the league and giving our condolences to his family and to everyone around the league who knew and loved him. So I'll serve it right up for you, Ben. I mean, David Stern was a commissioner for a long time. I know Adam Silver's been in control for about almost 6 years now, and he's doing great things. But what do you remember most about what David Stern did for the league?
Well, I mean, I think his legacy, and I'm not the first person to say this, is that he was able to really bring the NBA to become a global sport and also to become a real marquee sport because now it seems unthinkable, but there were days where the NBA played on tape delay, where people just didn't really care. And he grew the sport in such a magnificent way. But personally, my favorite part of David Stern was his random moments of calling on to TV shows, calling on to something like SportsCenter or Jim Rome's show. I vividly remember him calling in to Jim Rome's show live to debate Jim Rome. His crazy defenses of the NBA after the gambling scandal with Tim Donaghy. Just, I loved that no matter how old Stern got, no matter how long he was there, he never lost that fire. He never lost the passion for what he did. And even after he stopped being the commissioner, he was still so involved in the league. And I always admired and loved his fire about the game and about the NBA as an organization.
Oh, that was very well said, sir. Well, I'm going to be biased for a second because he did go to my alma mater, Rutgers University. So the university mourns the passing of David Stern as well. But I just appreciate what he did for basketball, not just the NBA, but he launched the WNBA back in 1997. And just the way he made the NBA such a global brand with getting them back involved in the Olympics with the Dream Team in 1992 and all the international scouting that has come since then and all the great players from overseas that have come in to the NBA, the Pau Gasols, the Marc Gasols, the Dirk Nowitzkis. I mean, the list goes on and on. So if it weren't for Stern, the league would not have expanded to what it is today, which is a money-making powerhouse, with so many superstars and teams in big markets. I mean, it's just awesome to watch. And I was listening on Thursday, the day after David passed, and NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman was on ESPN Radio, and he was saying when he worked under Stern at the NBA office, there were like 25, 30 people. And when he left to become commissioner of the NHL, there were over 700. So
Yeah.
David Stern did a lot for the league, and, he'll be missed. It's unfortunate that he was taken, too soon for his time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think another thing that you really have to give Stern credit for, and I mean, this can be a little bit of a touchy subject, but he took a league that was majority black African American players, a league that a lot of people were dubious could become a global major sport because of that. A lot of people in the 70s and 80s, I mean, you can go back and read it, there were a lot of people who thought this league is too black. It's not going to ever be successful. And obviously, he had some missteps. I mean, I think the dress code ages poorly. But one of the things that he really did for the NBA, and I think this should be one of the legacies that he really gets credit for, is his ability to turn this sport into a platform for the athletes. Because we have a profession here in terms of podcasting because there are so many storylines, because all the superstars are personalities. And you look around other major sports leagues, and there's really no other league like the NBA. There's no other league that promotes its stars the way the NBA does. And if you can give credit to Stern for one thing, I think that's it. Everyone says, "Oh, Bird and Magic saved the NBA." Stern got lucky. Michael Jordan saved the NBA, but he gave them the platform to do it, and he encouraged them to do it. Where you look at other sports and commissioners don't always do that, and so I think he deserves tremendous credit for giving his athletes a platform and for promoting, this league as a way to progress socially, but also to let those guys become their own brands, which is now not a novel thought at all. But when it first started with Bird and Magic and Jordan, that wasn't a thing that was common. And I think Stern deserves a lot of credit for helping be the genesis of that.
He absolutely was taken from us way too soon. So our condolences again to the Stern family and to everyone around the league who knew and loved him. But Ben, what do you say we get into some current NBA stories? I want to ask you, did you catch any of the Jazz Pelicans game from Monday night?
I only saw the very, very end when they
Which
pulled
is
out,
what
with
I
it, like
want to talk about.
126, 124. Yeah.
Yeah, so they were down two and they forced a missed shot. And on the rebound, three different people called timeout. You had Lonzo Ball, JJ Redick, and Alvin Gentry all calling timeout. The refs didn't see it. And then to make a long story short, Brandon Ingram drove the length of the
Right.
floor into Rudy Gobert, who contested the shot, hit his wrist, no foul was called. Pelicans lose by two. So I'm just noticing a bit of a trend here in the NBA, especially with the Pelicans, because this happened, in mid-December in a game against the Nets where they lost in overtime. It just seems like the officiating in the NBA this season is just not what it should be. I mean, are you seeing a pattern, or do you think what happened to the Pelicans is just a coincidence?
I mean, I remember a time. I mean, we're talking about David Stern, so maybe I'm just getting into my time machine here and reminiscing. But I remember a time when that call on Dirk Nowitzki against the Heat, he had a block, and Dwayne Wade hit the winning free throws, where there were multiple 24-hour news cycles where people say you just cannot make that call. You absolutely can't make a call with that there. You have to let the players play. And I think now we're just so harsh on these referees because just a few days before this, it was last week, I guess, Zach LaVine had a layup against Gobert at the end of the game, and a lot of Bulls fans felt there should have been a foul at the end. I mean, this is just the way basketball is. I mean, these are 50-50 calls, and when we slow it down to, an eighth of a second, you say, "Oh yeah, of course there's contact there. You gotta call the foul." But I mean, I think these referees are human. It's really tough to call these plays, and I think if anything, it's just, are they fair? Are they calling the game consistently? So to me, I really hesitate to criticize too much because I think it's incredibly hard to officiate a sport where the athletes are so fast and so strong. And as long as you're doing it consistently, you're gonna miss some calls. That's just the way it goes. And I think overall, the refs have gotten better, not worse, over the past 20 years. It's just the athletes are so much faster, and it's a harder game to call.
See, I think they got worse. I mean, looking across sports, right? In baseball, you have instant replay, but then you constantly have balls and strikes being argued to the point where they want to automate the strike zone. The NFL, this is one of the worst officiated regular seasons in NFL history. And I know the referees there are under a lot of fire. And in the NBA, I'm just noticing a trend of things going south. And I get it's a hard job and that they're human beings, but they need to do something to get this right because it's baffling. The Pelicans have been on the wrong side of this way too much, and I just see it happening, and I just thought it was worth discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the things that really brings it to the forefront for, the NBA and the NFL. I mean, obviously the NFL, the Saints go out on an egregious non-call last year. Um, and then in the NBA, you have a guy like James Harden who just he calls a lot of attention to the referees. And I mean, watching a Rockets game can be tough sometimes, especially because when you're watching the games, it's like a lot of times you feel like every play Harden has the ball, you could or you couldn't call a foul. It's kind of up to you with the way that he plays. He does a lot of these things, and that's what makes this so tough now is that I feel like there's so much subjectivity to it, and that's what makes it so tough. Is everyone's upset all the time, I think, with the refs because they say, "Oh, that's got to be foul," and that isn't. And it's just I can't imagine being a referee in today's climate where fan bases regularly taunt the refs with "refs you suck" chant, things like that, and then also just the fact that you're doing such a tough job, and you're getting yelled at by the players. So I tend to err on the side of, give these guys a break. They're doing the best they can, and honestly, most of us couldn't do half of what they do. And I think sometimes it's just you kind of got to let the players play, and if as long as the best team wins the game, that's about all you can ask for.
Well, I know you're trying to stay on the good side of officiating, and I've just talked myself into a lifetime ban from official school, which I'm upset about because I had looked at that as a potential career. Um, anyway, so moving on, this was a bigger story than I made it out to be. I think when Joel Embiid dislocated his finger, it looked nasty. Did you see that?
Yeah, did not look good. Yeesh.
And
The
then he
finger
came
going
back
down,
into
man.
the game. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
I know that Embiid's injury prone, and he was able to come back into the game, and that's great. But do you think now he's going to miss any time? And if it does, what does it do to your Sixers title chances?
I mean, he should. I mean, the thing is with this team, they should be resting him. It's just, I think for the Sixers, you really have to play the long game with this team. I mean, if Embiid misses time in the playoffs, your title chances are zero. They I don't mean to exaggerate here, but he is easily their best player and the guy who's most important to their team by a wide margin. Now, the thing that's pretty funny I think about the season is we came into the season, Jason, and we said, it's Bucks and Sixers. That's it. There was no. We barely even we hesitated to even enter anyone else into this discussion, and we begrudgingly said, there's some other teams that are good. And we've looked at the season, and you open your eyes in the new year, 2020, and the Boston Celtics are on pace for 60 plus wins. The Heat are close to 60 wins for that pace. The Raptors are, I mean, they're playing incredible basketball given all the injuries they have. You have the Sixers. You have the Pacers who still haven't even gotten Oladipo back, and they're only a half game behind the Sixers. So, I mean, I think if there's a panic meter in Philly, the one thing you've got to be worried about that might be sending that into the middle region is that the Sixers could find themselves on the bottom half of the playoff bracket, which was absolutely unthinkable at the start of the season. I mean, Jason, would you be worried about this team having to go to another team's home court for a game 7 in the first round?
What worries me, aside from Embiid's dislocated finger, which I think in the long term he'll be absolutely fine, but
Yeah.
what worries me is the chances of imploding from within because Al Horford's starting to show signs of a decline. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but Embiid keeps taking little pot shots at Ben Simmons in the media regarding his lack of shooting. He's like, well, we'll win if we shoot more. And he just keeps saying that so nonchalantly and taking these little shots at Ben Simmons. I think eventually, if Simmons doesn't start shooting the ball, the two I'm sure are good friends, but he might end up snapping and that team will implode from within. So that's something that bears watching because, look, as talented as Ben Simmons is, he's not guaranteed to start shooting the ball. So if they don't figure something out offensively, I think that's what's going to be their downfall ultimately.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, one of the things is I think the guy who you really have to look at here is I loved the Horford signing. I mean, I really, really liked that signing. And unfortunately, one of the problems for them is he's just not a really willing 3-point shooter. There are so many times when you watch them play where you feel like he could shoot more, and he's shooting a career high. That's the thing that's really remarkable is he's shooting 4 threes a game, Jason. I mean, it's not like he's really hesitating, but nonetheless, they're just giving him so many looks, and he's just not the type of guy who wants to shoot that much from out there. And I think that's really hurting this team because I don't know how much of the Sixers you've watched, Jason, but one of the number one things you see when you watch them is they enter the ball into the post for Embiid. He kicks it out to Horford or to Simmons or someone like that. They don't shoot, and then by the time they're doing whatever they're doing, the defense is completely reset, and now there's only 12 seconds, 10 seconds on the shot clock, and they don't get a good possession. And I think this is something Brett Brown and Embiid have talked about ad nauseum, but you've just got to shoot those shots. I mean, you're not going to get a better shot in the NBA.